Today we're going to make a little Pip-Boy with a scroll feature. You can see the top right scrolling and then does it like this. We're going to make a little bit of a more basic version of this, but I will go over the more complicated version. We're going to do kind of a hybrid system today where I have basically templates, some kind of blank things, and we're going to set them up. So it's going to be a little bit of a tutorial, but it's also going to be a little bit of an overview since we're not doing things perfectly from scratch. The materials, which I'll link in the description, we're going to do a very basic version, but basically since this is in a material, it uses anything you can do in a material. So I just copied something from a CCTV, like post-process image effect, and you can get, that's where you get those lines. The other kind of thing to point out that makes all this work is it uses the widget, and you can actually pull a render target out of a widget. However, doing that, at least in 4.27, I don't think it's been changed that much in like Unreal Engine 5, is you can pull a render target out of a widget and you can then use that in your materials, but it's a bit finicky on when it lets you do that. So I'm going to go over kind of the parameters that I found that you need to correctly pull a render target out of a widget while the widget isn't actually like in your view. So doing that, there's going to be a few components. I'm going to be copying some nodes here just for the ease. I'm going to like drag this over to my other screen, but I am going to be going over it step by step to make sure things work. And then I'm also going to be copying some like rotations and things since I took a while to tune those, and I don't think that's critical for this tutorial. We initially set up the material here on our little Pip-Boy. I'm going to include these meshes in my Discord. They'll just be I have an asset share channel. Anyone can access it. So if you want those, come and get them. And then we're going to bring up the Pip-Boy. We use a timeline for that. We just blend between two transforms. The way I have my transforms nested, at 0, it's at rest, and then I know I have like a point where I know it looks good in front of the screen, and we blend to that. This timeline is just a curve, and it's about 0.8 seconds. I also set the field of view down a little bit, down to 72 from 90. I do capture the original field of view at the start. The widget prep is just being called here. And then lastly, the actual scroll feature is attached to the scroll wheel, the input axis, which I have under project settings, input scroll. If you just click this and scroll your wheel, or you can look it up in this, mouse wheel. Notice it's not up or down, it's the actual axis one, so make sure to get that right. And then for me, I'm bringing up the Pip-Boy with Q, and I have it to toggle. You can have it hold if you do like this. This means you have to hold it. And then if you let go, it goes away. So that's how I initially had it, but I think toggle, particularly for a menu system, probably works a bit better. For the scroll wheel, I'm just adding some pitch to the little dial model, and then I'm setting that rotation. I'm blending it a little bit. And then for the actual menu, I'm grabbing the widget. I'm just doing a cast. You probably would want this to be an interface or something, but for this tutorial it'll be fine. And then in the select button, we are setting whatever our initial index is back to white. This is what they are by default. And then all this logic here is basically to handle the top and bottom. So if the index is 0 and if it goes above the last index of the list here, like the last button, then just kind of loop back around to the top, which will be 0. And then the same thing here. Hey, if it goes below 0, go to the last index of your array. And I'm just setting them to be red. So they highlight. That being said, I have my material to be desaturated, so you can't really notice that it's red. And then on construct, this is where I spawn in all the buttons. The buttons, I'm not going to be recreating this, so I'm going to actually go over this before I start working on in the other ones. The button is quite basic though. I literally don't even have a canvas panel. I deleted the canvas panel and pulled in a button, and then I put in some text here right in the center of the button. I found a size that worked for me, and then on pre-construct I just set the text to this, which is instance editable and expose on spawn. And then this, because it's exposed on spawn, it's right here, so I can set the text to whatever I want as I spawn in the buttons. And we're just doing a for loop. There's 12 buttons since I'm starting from 0 to 12, and we're just making an array of buttons, parenting them to this vertical box, and then setting some padding on it so they're not all totally squished together. Then that gives us the array, and then we also engage. We set whatever our default button is, which in this case is 0 to red. So that's how that works. Okay, so now that we have done an overview, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to do the world settings, and I'm going to go into my tutorial folder. I'm going to grab my copy of the first person, and I'm just going to go into game mode, and I'm going to change the pawn to that person. And if we click, this is what we have. So this is, I have a few things set up. I just have the widget literally in front of the face of the character, and this is rather important, so I'm going to pull these off to the side since I'm using them as a reference. This we don't need. If y'all have questions about this, certainly ask me. This is my widget. This is the character. All it has is some debug stuff I'm going to go over. And then the Pip-Boy widget we'll need here. Okay. So let's jump into viewport to see what we're looking at here. So look, this is in front, but notice if we put it, I think like 9. So that's also in front, but it doesn't show up. And that's because of the camera's clipping plane. So you have to find a balance here, because we are going to pull in. So like, let's set up the initial material. So I'm going to create a custom event here. I'm just call it widget prep, and we are going to call it on begin play. Oops. Widget prep. Okay. We're saving all this, and then for this, I'm just going to get the camera field of view like I do in the other one. This is just the first person camera. I'm going to create a dynamic material instance, and I'm going to create a variable for the material I create. And then this is where we're grabbing the widget and we are putting it into the widget texture, which we are going to make a new version of this. We're going to go over the material. The one we're going to make is going to be a lot simpler, so we'll replace that. Well, we want this name though, and literally all you need to do to get this kind of working is we're just going to do widget texture, or sorry, texture sample. And then we want it to be a parameter, and we're just calling it widget texture, and just plug it into the base and emissive. It wants a default, so let's just give it a default. The default doesn't matter since we're going to immediately override it. I like that one actually. And again, this is a normal material, so you can do whatever effects you want. Like in this one, I desaturate it, I set the roughness, I want it to be a little bit shiny so it looks like glass. I add in this like the kind of screen effect, but you don't actually need any of that to get this to work. So now that we have that, we widget texture. Let's set this back actually to 11. Actually, okay, no, we're gonna keep this 9. And I'm going to plug in this. I'm going to show you what happens. This is how to debug this, by the way. Seems like I'm doing a deviation, but this is kind of a critical element because you need this to debug why you're thinking. Because chances are you're going to try this, it's not going to work, and you're not going to know why. This is how to figure out. So look, the texture didn't get set, but why not? My widget's in my scene, but that's because it's not being rendered. The widget right now is being culled out because it's not in the field of view of the camera. It's being clipped by the near clipping plane. So let's set this back. I'm like, okay, maybe we move it forward a little bit. Okay, let's see here. That also wasn't bad. Oh, right. Yeah, here we go. That's why we did it. Not valid. Wait, but it's in the near clipping plane. You can see it, so why is it not considered valid? Well, the reason it's not valid is because it's too quick. We need a little bit of a delay here. I'm laughing since I'm remembering all the things I did to debug this, so that's what we need. We need a delay here, because it's asking for the widget render like the moment the player spawns in, but the widget render needs a moment to create the widget render target. So if we do this, there we go. It's valid. Cool. But this isn't acceptable. Like, it's covering up the thing we want where we want our Pip-Boy to be. So the rational thing is like, well, maybe we can move it back a little bit so it's like behind, and we could like scale it down some, maybe like half of that, like that. Oh, there we go. Look, there's like nice and hidden. We can still see it. What's going on here? Okay, that it considers that valid. Let me put it maybe right here though. Valid. I think this is actually fine, but I'm not running into it. But a thing I have run into is if it's behind an object, like, it can actually be culled out. So you kind of want to check. I've set this to no collision, by the way. Turn off the shadow. Those are just preferences. But there's a setting here, use as an occluder, that you may want to uncheck. I'm going to leave it since there's a way to work around that. The way to work around it that I found is you just put this widget, where's my transforms there, at 11, which is in front of it, but it's in front of the near clipping plane, but also in front of the widget. And then you just set this to a scale of 0. that seems to work. It seems to still consider that in the camera, but it doesn't interfere with anything, right? And you do want this parented to your camera, so that way it's always valid. Okay, so we have that working. That's like, this is honestly the cool part. This is Keith Make Games, which I'll link in the description, was the one who actually pointed this feature out to me. I didn't even realize you could do this in Unreal, so I wanted to show y'all. So now that this is working, we want to do the little transform effect. The way I have these parented is this is the location where I want it kind of down, and you do actually want it kind of forward, so that way it doesn't like clip through your camera and come in from behind, since it's going to basically transform straight from these 2 points. And then this one I actually have where I would want it in front of the screen, but I have this parented to this, and what this setup lets me do is if I reset all these transforms to 0, it puts it at the place I want. So it means I only really have to worry about one transform location instead of 2. You don't have to. You could plug in both transform locations just fine, but that's what we're doing. I'm just going to literally copy this stuff though. So I'm bringing up my Pip-Boy with Q. We do need to set up this timeline. So this is a float. We set up a curve. This one's at 0.8 and 1, and this is just at 0, 0. And I'm going to call this, let's see, arm blend. And this is what I was saying. So one transform is just 0, 0. And then the other transform is where this arm location is, right here. And by the way, if you ever want to quickly preview, like, oh, what does it look like? You can just drag it in, set this to 0, and then you can drag your player in and see, like, it gives you a little preview. It's like, okay, is that a good spot? And then, but however, make sure to drag it back to the arm idle and set this back to 0 like that. Otherwise, it won't work when you try it again. And then I'm also setting the field of view just like this. And this should blend in just like that. I press Q, brings it up, press Q, goes away. Okay. Now the scroll system. How do I want to do this? Because we know this is working, we can detach it. We don't need it to tell us if things are valid or not. Technically, yeah, 1 second's, quick enough. Let's create our custom widget though. So what I like to do, since this is all gray and it's hard to know if it's working, is just put something here. It like almost doesn't matter what it is. So just like this, This literally doesn't matter. I'm just doing it so we can see if this is spawning incorrectly. Which, for that, we set under this widget here. We want it, I don't think the timing, this is more for like when the widget pauses, if the game pauses. I don't think this isn't critical. You do want it in world space, and you do want to set the draw size to whatever you want. Other than that, I turned off the collision since we don't need that. And we can probably, I turned off the use as occluder here. And let's actually turn that off on the Pip-Boy as well. And I'm going to turn off the dial. use as occluder, since I don't think those help. They don't really break anything with the current setup, but there we go. So now we have our custom one. Nothing happens though. So I have this vertical box right here. Let's fill it up with the stuff we want. The only thing I have in the event graph so far is just the widget we're going to spawn in. This is the button. And this I'm actually going to kind of create from scratch, I think. I will copy some of it. But there is some important nuance here. So for loop. So this one, I always get confused. We don't want the for each loop, we just want a normal for loop. And then we'll do this. The last index will be 11, since obviously you can make as many as you want. This I'll copy. This is just, I'm appending in some text. And I'll call this like item. And since it's being appended, I want a little space at the end. And we create that. We now want to add this to the button array right here. So this you can create fairly easily. You basically just do create variable and then immediately delete it. And then you want this to be an array instead. And then you can drag it back in. That's how I created this, because you want this to be the type of the thing that you're spawning in. So this is the button type. So we're adding it to the list. We're adding this to the vertical box, which is this right here. And then I'm adjusting the margin to be 3 on all sides, the padding. Okay, so this should spawn in all our things. Let's see if they are. There they are. Item 0, 1, 2, 3. Technically, I think you could probably do this to this, and that would be fine. Yeah, there, 1 through 12. We now want to create a custom select button. And then I'm going to add in a parameter here. This is the axis. It just determines if you're scrolling up or down. And it's called axis because we're feeding it in from our input axis. So this will make sense in a moment. So the first thing we want to do is whatever thing we currently are selected at, before we shift, we want to set it back to what it's supposed to be. If this wasn't here, we'd basically just turn all the buttons red and nothing would get turned back. And then, as I went over before, this logic here, I'm inverting it since I like just so it matches how things actually scroll. I think it feels better that way, if you know, that's preference. But this is basically to handle if you scroll to the top of the list or the bottom of the list, right? And then after we select the button that we want next, we want to turn it whatever color we want, which in our case will be red. Notice I'm not changing the button directly, I'm changing the button inside of the button. So I need to grab the button spawned, and that's the thing I have to change, the background color. Notice there is actually, if you do change color and opacity, like, oh, that should work, right? Not actually. I'll show you what this does. These are different. Set background color and set color and opacity are different, and I will show you how they are different. So clicking the button, you have color and opacity and background color. So look, if I change the color and opacity, it actually doesn't change the button, it changes whatever things are in the button. So in this case, it's our text. Where the background color actually changes the button color, right? So keep in mind that if you just change the color, figure out which part of the button you're changing color. So it does matter. Okay, so now we have this. Let's bring in our scroll system. I think I'm going to drag most of this in all at once. Yeah. So we're kind of doing two things on the scroll system. This here is, we're just going to focus on this for now, actually. This is the actual logic. This is the aesthetics of the little dial rotating. This is the only logic to actually get the thing to scroll. So we want to grab the axis, get the absolute value of the axis, and then assuming this is greater than 1, this is just an update check. So if you look, if I play here, and then jump to this. So notice, and this is true of most like inputs, inputs will keep checking, right? So I don't want to be setting my button like again and again and again. I only want to set it when I'm actually scrolling, when like the axis is doing something. So that's why there's this branch here. I don't want to be constantly calling my button or my widget just every single frame. So that's why that's there. And then I'm just engaging the select button. So this is really the logic. Most of the logic is inside the, not the button, but the widget here. This is the actual scrolling logic, which isn't too complicated. This is a little tricky logic, but it's not the worst, I don't think. So let's bring up our thing. Nothing is actually, let's see what's going on. Widget selected. Let's see, index 0. Let's turn that off. What you can do here is a sanity check. Just do print string and just put something unique there. Okay, so it's not even called, which is good news, because I know why. Because we're casting to the wrong thing. So cast to, it's not that widget, it's the tutorial widget. By the way, this is one of the problems with cast, is they're very finicky like that. So you kind of want to use interfaces and stuff. Cast also create direct references, which can bloat your game's memory, which becomes a problem. Look at that. That's pretty cool. So now that we have that, I'm going to show you this here. So see, it's setting it to black. So that's why we don't. I mean, technically you could use that. We just need to reset it as well right there. Okay, the last little finishing touch that we're actually going to go over. I may go over some of the material stuff as well. This video is getting pretty long, but let's do the little scroll dial. So the little dial, let's jump into. So I have it parented to the Pip-Boy here. And I just put this in the location I wanted the dial, and then this is zeroed out, so that way I can rotate it without having to worry about any transforms. And then I just grab the dial and I add some rotation relative to the axis value, so that determines up or down. I want it to be opposite, same thing, I need to reverse the axis. Technically I could probably reverse it here and save myself some trouble, but and then the pitch, I want to, and the yaw I want to keep the same. I'm only affecting the roll. And then basically what this is checking is like, hey, only try to rotate it if the rotation I'm trying to get to is different than the rotation I'm at right now. And then I blend it a little bit with an interp to make it smoother. I'm not sure that makes a huge difference. I feel like it does, but it could be just in my head. And that's the system. The last thing I'm going to go over just to kind of show how you can expand the system is like this. You can add effects inside of your material. So let's say I want to set like desaturate. I could put that here. By the way, that shortcut to grab both of them is Control and Shift. You can grab both. I saw someone do that and I've been using it since. So there, it's black and white. You could add in like a, let's say you wanted like a tint here. So I can add in, or I'll call that tint. Let's say, oh, let's tint it like green, or I don't know, red is kind of a nice tint. So let's multiply both these by this color, see what we get. There you go. That's kind of cool. That's all we're going to go over today. I just wanted to, the main kind of element of this that I think is cool is I had no idea you could grab a render target out of a widget. And once I figured out how to do that in a way that Unreal doesn't get mad at you, it kind of unlocks a lot of possibilities. I'm sure y'all can think of plenty of ideas. I used the Pip-Boy example since it's a very obvious kind of demonstration of how to use this stuff. But I mostly just want to get this out here. I haven't seen any tutorials on this, so I wanted to make one. And you know, shout out to Keith Makes Games, who basically told me about this in the first place. And then I also have a Discord server where you can ask questions if this isn't working for you, and that's where I'll put the Pip-Boy model assets in the channel there as well. All right, catch you later.